Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Ryan Frederick, who is the principal at digital product firm AWH. Ryan, welcome to the program.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Hey, so I'm excited to talk to you because I think that so many times today people feel like the word product is tangible, and many times it is, but you guys focus on digital products. So I want to dive into what that means and what that opportunity could be for businesses. Give us a little bit of background on yourself, and then we'll dive into learning.
Yeah, that's a great setup because I think product has been co-opted for better or for worse from the software space, and even though all of us use physical products every day, in the grand sort of conversation now, product almost always means software or digital products because software is eating the world. So I've been a part of starting 6 software companies over time. 2 of them went relatively well, 2 of them went okay, 2 of them were abject failures. So I've experienced the journey going well and it also going not so well. And then 10 years ago, joined a product firm, AWH, that you mentioned. So I've been a principal at the firm now for 10 years. We help clients from startups up to enterprises to build software products. And then I've written 2 books. Now an angel investor, and have had opportunities to sort of expand into other creative endeavors. So a very less than strategic and less than planned journey, but good and enjoyable overall.
Yeah, I was talking to someone just this week that runs a firm where they were talking about how so many times you can get pigeonholed into one certain, type of job description or job production. And, if you can make your team have a variety of not only roles, but interest and maybe even side hustles. And if that side hustle can benefit the firm, because, you might write the book, but it's about, concepts that the firm, executes on. So I think that's such a healthy way to approach business because, boy, punching the clock or, turning the screws on that widget sure can get old over time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's, one of the things that's gotten lost, I think, as part of sales, marketing, thought leadership, et cetera, is the fact that you need a sort of stack of different content and thought leadership. You need some macro stuff like books and ebooks and white papers, and then you need micro stuff like blog posts and podcasts, and you need a combination. And I think a lot of people and a lot of firms shy away from the macro stuff because it takes so long to write a book and to put out a really good research paper. And so people now I think gravitate a little bit too much and rely too much on the micro and don't do enough of the macro. And I think there's a place for both.
Yeah, 100%. And I find it curious that one of your little mantras or statements that you say is many people should not be an entrepreneur. So when you think about an organization, that's one thing. You're a team, part of a team, and in a maybe a leader. But let's talk about entrepreneurs. Why do you feel like people maybe should not be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it's mostly because people don't understand what they're really signing up for. Most people think it's going to be glamorous and sexy and romantic, and they're going to make a shit ton of money really fast. And they don't understand the grind, and they also aren't disciplined enough to actually make it work. People have an idea or identify a problem, et cetera, and that is such a small part of making it actually work. It's the day in, day out, ruthless prioritization, ruthless execution that makes something ultimately come to fruition. And Look, most people aren't that disciplined, right? Most people aren't as healthy and fit as they want to be because they're not as disciplined as they need to be. They don't have the relationships they want because they're not as intentional and disciplined about, cultivating the relationships. And so most people aren't disciplined. And being an entrepreneur, for me, is about two things. It's about being an unending problem solver and then being relentlessly disciplined.
I think that's awesome because, you hear so many times on Shark Tank, well, what's the actual problem we're solving here? And I think that so many times the level of success is predicated on the depth of the problem you solve, because you can have success, air quotes, little s, just going, oh, yeah, we can do this. But if there is a real problem, whatever that might be, let's think of, I don't know, cybercrime. If your company got hit by, some cyber, whatever infusion and you were called in, man, that is a big problem, and if you can solve it quickly and efficiently, that's huge. But if you're talking, again in the IT, if you're just talking about, oh, well, we put in some filters and in case your people want, then it's not really a problem and it can get ignored. What do you do? What do you tell your clients regarding that kind of a mindset?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there are degrees and levels of problems, and most people approach building a product and a company without the deep problem understanding that they need to build a product and to provide a solution to customers that customers value in a significant enough way to be able to build a really successful company around it. We're also wired to, when we see a problem, we're wired to start solutioning against it and building against it really, really early and soon, which means we then often build a shallow and superficial, low-value solution to the problem. And the one thing that I talk to entrepreneurs that I get a chance to talk to is, if you don't understand the problem at an expert level, and to me that means better than your customers and your users, then you don't understand it well enough yet to build a product that your customers are going to value well enough and pay enough for to make sense, to build that product. And then I say, look, spend another 2 years understanding the problem, or 4 years, or whatever it is. And of course that goes over like a lead balloon because people don't want to kind of invest that kind of time. But I truly believe if you're going to solve a problem in a meaningful way, you've got to understand it at an expert level.
Yeah, it's almost like someone took the concept of minimum viable product and never iterated from there. Like, oh, yeah, let's just get it going. And then you just kind of ignore it. And, well, let's build it. Let's make it better, bigger, faster.
Yeah, and I do see a lot of products and a lot of companies that they build an MVP or an initial prototype, and then they're sort of stuck because they get to that point and they're like, okay, well, we've now validated this little piece of the problem with maybe a customer or two, but that's just a compass that lets you know that you're at least heading in a direction, right? That might get you to a destination that looks good. But then they're sort of stuck because then they don't know where to go from it. They don't have enough understanding of the problem to build out the solution further. They don't understand enough yet to market it and sell it properly to acquire more customers. They don't know it enough yet to go out and raise a bunch more money. So oftentimes you'll see people build an MVP, bring it out to a handful of customers, and then the whole thing kind of dies because they still didn't understand the problem and the customer current state and new reality around a larger solution. And so then the MVP sort of comes out, and then that's where it starts and ends.
Yeah, it was a proof of concept, but you go throw a party at proof of concept and, but that's like square 1/2. That's zero space. So that's a really, really good point. And that's one of the reasons that products would fail. Let's kind of put a little clarity on this. When you say you work with companies on products and digital products, what might that look like? Give us an example, maybe in an industry or a case kind of a study. What would you be able to do to help out in that perspective?
Yeah, most of our clients come to us, whether they're startups, mid-markets, nonprofits, or enterprises. They come to us with a blurry vision of what they want to build and who they want to build it for. And so our team engages with them to figure out, okay, what are the outcomes that we're trying to drive? What does success look like for this product? And then sort of work back from there to then say, okay, what's the problem statement? And then build experiments inside of that to say, how do we validate the problem? How do we validate the right solution? And how do we validate if we're progressively on the right path? And of course, we've got designers and engineers and DevOps people, et cetera, from a software product production perspective. But in my mind, probably the most valuable thing that we do with clients is help them along the journey of figuring out why they're building something, who they're building it for, what the value proposition is, and then how are they going to sort of position the product, given those those other things. And most clients want to just start building, right? Because that seems tangible, that seems like progress. But more often than not, if you start building without that other context and those foundational elements, you're more likely to build something that nobody cares about and nobody values to the extent that you need to, than if you put in the work ahead of time to really be grounded in problem understanding, the why you're doing it, and then how you're going to go about actually doing it in a way that customers value. And there's a lot of, validation that gets done poorly with initial customers that creates a lot of false positives that then facilitate software products getting built, where the builders then, say, well, we don't know why this is working because, the early customers all agreed that we were on the right path. And then if you start sort of peeling back the layers and understanding, well, what kind of questions did you ask them and what kind of validation were you doing and how were you doing the validation, you realize it was all on the positive. And all of the positivity that they got back from the early customers were false positives because they never gave the early customers permission to tell them what they didn't like about the product. They only asked them what they did like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I literally this morning had coffee with a colleague of mine, and we were talking about how when you ask people their opinion and you get these rave reviews and, oh yeah, we would do that, and oh, you're going to build this product, yeah, we want it, and then you take the time to build it and go back to the same people and say, okay, here's the credit card link, buy it, and they're like crickets. And so you've got to get to the point where people get it, like it, see it, need it, and then take action. So I mean, that's a big piece of thing, and maybe it takes the crowd sourcing of not only content or ideas but engagement, and maybe having the crowd be part of somehow the process without getting in the middle of it. So that's a super good point that you bring up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a big piece of our work now, and this has evolved over time, is helping our clients form and execute customer advisory boards where we say to our client, you have an inkling of an understanding of the problem. We know how to build software products well and successfully, but who really has the most context that we need to tap into to make sure that this goes as well as possible and increases the odds of success? Customers. And so we help them set up customer advisory boards. We were on a call with a new client yesterday, and 5 customers as part of this new customer advisory board. And there's just nothing in the early product development phases of getting customers looped in, giving them permission to tell you have no idea what you're doing and no idea what you're talking about, and then give them the keys and let them drive, the car for a little bit, because they will direct you to where you should be focusing and what the product should look like and how it should do it to solve their problems. And then what you're doing as part of that is they're also getting ownership, right? They're taking ownership of the product because you're letting them give you so much feedback. And for an early product, whether you're talking about a startup or frankly even an enterprise company that's trying to bring out a new product, that early customer ownership is critical, because those early stories and those early case studies are then what you go use to market and sell the product to others.
Yes. Yeah, and it's all part of a process. One builds upon the other, and I'm certain that you cover those kind of things in your book, The Founder's Manual. Talk a little bit about that book regarding what's another kind of a takeaway that people will get from the book.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yep, some of these things that we've talked about are in there, and there's other things in there. The book is broken up into 3 sections: founder, product, and startup. And I talk about the founder journey in the founder section and why most people shouldn't be founders, and why those that do become founders are often in it for the wrong reasons and aren't self-aware enough and don't have enough discipline, etc. In the product section, talk more about doing proper customer validation and building products effectively. And then in the startup piece about building the right team and raising money and all of those kinds of things. And one of the themes that is across all 3 of the sections is that founders need to be really good storytellers, because you're not going to recruit the team that you want. You're not going to raise the investment that you want. You're not going to acquire the customers that you want. You're not going to build the product that you want if you're not a good storyteller. And storytelling, I think fundamentally is a skill that is lacking in the world. And I think founders are particularly challenged at storytelling because they often come with a specific skill set to being a founder, i.e. they're an engineer, maybe they're a salesperson, maybe they've been in a managerial position at a company and they've decided to now take this entrepreneurial journey, and they probably haven't effectively ever been taught how to be a good storyteller before, and now they're in this situation where storytelling means everything.
Well, and I would even add to that, about the time that you figure out the story you should be telling and kind of get that, dialed in and polished up well, the story needs to be updated, because not that your actual foundation or mission or vision change, but nuances change, and you need that story framework dialed in so well that you can kind of shift and pivot and bob and weave to kind of bring freshness to it.
Absolutely. One of the things that I chastise entrepreneurs frequently about, that I see pitch decks from, and they want to talk to me about either investing or helping them with the product, is they send me the pitch deck, and then they'll get to a point on a slide and they're like, oh, well, that needs to be updated, or well, we've added 4 more customers, right, to that, and I'm like, why would you ever send a pitch deck that wasn't the current state of the company? And it just reinforces your point that these are living, breathing things, but often the storytelling and then the materials around telling the story get outdated, and that's how I also know that a founder doesn't value storytelling, because if the pitch deck is 6 months old and yet you're trying to raise money from investors with a 6-month-old pitch deck, that the team is outdated, the customers are outdated, the product is outdated, it's like you don't get storytelling, and you're probably not going to be that effective moving forward, because you think that a 6-month-old pitch deck is telling a good story, and then it's not, and founders have a lot going on, right? And anybody who's building a software product and creating anything knows how hard it is, and everything is super fragile. But if you understand the value of, you've got to create some inspiration and motivation for an investor or a customer or somebody to join the team that would be a highly valued team member, then man, you better get the storytelling piece right, and you better keep your content around the story up to date. Otherwise, you're sort of hamstringing yourself through the process.
100%. Well, Ryan, thanks so much. It was really super chatting with you about your experiences and your advice and your books. What's the best way that people can reach out, not only connect with you, but even pick up a copy of your books?
Yeah, the best way is awh.net. That's the product firm's website, but there are links to the books on that site as well. So start there, and then people can jump to a couple of different places.
Excellent. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on today.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.